Sandhan. All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.
Students of English language and literature all over Gujarat, I welcome you in AGIC studio for one of the topics of special English as well as compulsory English of first year BA, BCom and BSc. Munshi Premchand, one of the leading writers of English, Hindi and Gujarati literature as well as Urdu literature. He has written so many novels, short stories and poetry. One of the important short stories in the syllabus is The Child. Today we are going to discuss about that story. But let us begin with Munshi Premchand's biography. He was born on 31st July 1880 and he died on 8 October 1936. You can see on your screen, my dear students, that he was known as one of the most celebrated writers of the Indian subcontinent. He is associated with Hindustani literature. He was born as Dhanpat Rai Srivastav, a wealthy man. He began writing under the pen name Nawab Rai. Students, I would like to say something here. That his uncle was landlord. He wanted to see Premchandji as Nawab. And as his father suggested the name Dhanpat Rai, so he clubbed some of the parts from both the words and he started using the pen name Nawab Rai, but subsequently switched to Premchand, while he is known to all of us as Munshi Premchand. Munshi being an honorary prefix, this was used in earlier days, particularly in Mughal Emperor and in British rule. The person who contributed a lot in the field of language, who is having some kind of mastery over language, native speakers were given this kind of honor by the kings. Munshi is the word also associated with a role played by a person as if he is a secretary to the key person in the kingdom or in the organization. He has written number of novels, short stories and dramas. That is why he has been referred to as the Upanyas Samrat. And students, you can see it here. Upanyas Samrat. Samrat means king, emperor. And Upanyas means novels. So he was known as emperor among novelists by some Hindi writers. His works include more than a dozen novels, around 250 short stories, several essays and translations of a number of foreign literary works into Hindi. Today, we have with us Dr. Jean D'Souza in the studio to talk, discuss and give her opinions about one of the important and outstanding short stories of Munshi ji, which is in the syllabus. The name of the story is The Child. May I request Madam to say a few words.
Hello students. It's nice to meet you again on this medium of instruction and entertainment. Actually, it's fun to talk like this, right? We're going to talk today about the novel writer, about the story writer, the dramatist Munshi Premchand. As Sir has already told you, that Munshi Premchand was a great writer in India and has become well known not only in India but all over the world. His works have been translated into almost all Indian languages as well as into some foreign languages and into English, which we cannot even decide today whether it's a foreign language or an Indian language. But coming back to Munshi Premchand and the child, we need to talk also a little bit about Munshi Premchand as an interesting idea, something that you might be interested in. Munshi Premchand's stories were also made into Bollywood films, my dear students. Shatranj Ke Khiladi is a 1977 Indian film which is made by the Bengali director, the famous director Satyajit Ray. And this story was based on Munshi Premchand's short story of the same name. The name of the story was also Shatranj Ke Khiladi. And as you can see, it has a very interesting cast with Sanjeev Kumar. Amitabh Bachchan is the narrator in this story. Shabana Azmi and Syed Jafri. There is another Hindi film which was made by Munshi Premchand's story also. And again, this film too was directed by Satyajit Ray. The name of this film is Sadgati. It was made in 1981. And as you can see, again, a very interesting cast. It has Smita Patil, Om Puri, Mohan Agashe and Geeta Siddharth as their lead actors in this film.
Even madam, in modern days also, we can see number of movies have some kind of base of some of the novels. For example,
yes.
For example, we have Othello, English literature masterpiece, which was converted into movie Omkara.
Omkara. It is an adaptation of the Shakespearean play Othello, and similarly we also have another one, Makbul,
on the basis of Macbeth.
Macbeth, made by the same director.
Even recently I came to know even the movie Lutere was also originated from one of the leading stories of O. Henry, The Last Leaf.
Ah, okay. That is an interesting piece of knowledge, and if the students would also like to know, they must watch Romeo and Juliet before they go to watch the famous film Ram Leela,
Okay.
which is inspired by Romeo and Juliet. So this trend of making films from written work into Bollywood or Hollywood cinema is a very prominent trend. It's a very interesting thing. Going back to our story, we could now discuss maybe some of the main characters. The main characters in the story, as you can see on your screen, are the narrator, who is a rich landlord. He has a household full of servants. And there is Gangu, who is one of his servants in the household. And Gomti, a widow whom Gangu marries. And the child, the final character. The title is based on the child.
Madam, you have started nicely. We are interested in knowing through you something more about Gangu as a character in this story.
Yes, the story begins with the description of Gangu, and it starts like this, that people call Gangu a Brahmin because of his behavior. He is not actually a Brahmin, but they call him a Brahmin. Gangu does not behave like other servants. He does not like to bow down in front of his master. He does not like to do small jobs which the person himself or herself would not like to do. And he does not have many friends. He is very short-tempered. He gets angry easily. He does not socialize with other servants. He does not go to fairs and shows and melas and other places where people gather together. And interestingly, the writer says he does not even drink bhang, which all the other servants used to enjoy. So these are few of the characteristics of Gangu that you come across. It is interesting that people call Gangu a Brahmin because of his behavior.
So can we say that behavior indicates the caste of the person?
In this novel, in this story, yes, it does. Because Gangu is illiterate, he is not learned and educated like other Brahmins. He does not even go to pray. But on what basis is he called a Brahmin? The writer does not tell us more information. He just says that Gangu was called a Brahmin by everybody. The caste system used to be a very dominant, used to play a very dominant role at the time that Munshi Premchand wrote. And as you can see on the slide, just to remind you, I'm sure you all know, students, about the different castes we have in the Indian tradition. But we had this very strong caste system that was prevalent at that time.
So that means Premchand ji was under the impact of the social situation prevailing at that time.
Yes, that's
and it
very
was
true.
reflected in his works.
Yes, yes, that's very true.
Caste system was there, then child marriages were there. So can we say he was little bit realistic in his approach when he was writing, or whatever he experienced he was putting on a piece of paper through his writings?
Yes, and as we will see through the story of the child, we will know that, we will realize that a lot of the child is autobiographical for Munshi Premchand. But we will talk about that after we have finished talking about the story of the child. Now, while talking about Gangu, the narrator also mentions some things about himself. The narrator says that he does not like to talk with the servants. Again, this is connected as we were talking about the caste system. He prefers to do small jobs himself. He does not like to give advance payment to servants. This is very important because this is one of the reasons the narrator avoids talking to servants. He believes that a servant comes to him only when he wants money or when he wants chutti, when he wants leave. And this is why he prefers not talking to servants, so that they don't ask him for money or they don't ask him for leave.
Madam, would you throw some light on what do you mean by narrator in a story?
Okay, this story, interestingly, is written in first person.
Okay.
There are three ways of writing a story. You can write it in first person or second person or third person. This story is written in first person. So the entire story is written by the narrator, or by, you would feel that it is the author talking to you. Okay. The story is written with I saw Gangu, I met Gangu, and so on. And this is how the narrator plays an important role in this particular story.
So would you say, what are the characteristics of a narrator?
Yeah, so the narrator, as I told you, had these particular typical characteristics, and you can make out that he's a very dominant, sometimes even egotistical character as a character in this play. He does not like servants complaining about the other servants. He feels irritated when faced with a complaining servant or a servant who asks for money. He does not like people backbiting with each other. He does not like people telling bad things or wrong things or other things about other servants. And therefore, he prefers to stay by himself.
So at this stage, can we say the narrator is the most important character of this story?
Yes, at this stage, in the beginning of the story, the narrator is the most important character because the story is told from the viewpoint of the narrator. It is how the narrator sees things happening in front of him. What is happening in Gangu's life, what is happening in the world around him is told to us through the narrator's eyes, through the narrator's perspective.
So we can say he leads the story.
He leads the story. That's true.
So continue with the story.
Now, what happens is this. The story now moves forward, and one morning, Gangu comes to talk with his master, the narrator. Gangu was feeling very hesitant, and the master was very impatient because he was wanting to go for his morning walk. But after a lot of hesitation and a lot of difficulty, Gangu said at last, "I wish to be relieved of my duties, sir. I shall not be able to serve you any longer." So Gangu has come now to the narrator, to his master, to ask to be relieved. He wants to leave the job. Now for a servant to leave the job, it was nearly unheard of. Even today, when we have our servants in our houses, it's very unusual that the servant would want to leave the job. We might come across situations where perhaps the master or the mistress might want to relieve the servant. But for a servant to come and leave the job, it was unheard of. And the narrator obviously is absolutely shocked.
So it was a shocking surprise from the narrator.
It was a shocking
surprise for the narrator.
For the narrator, early in the morning, to come across a person like Gangu who comes and says, I don't want to work for you anymore. I want to leave this job. And so the narrator asks him, why? Obviously, the first question is, why do you want to leave? And Gangu gives a very enigmatic and cryptic and ununderstandable reply. I do not want people to point fingers at you on my account, replied Gangu. Why don't you say clearly what is on your mind? The narrator told Gangu impatiently. So now the narrator is getting irritated because it seems as if Gangu is talking in riddles, as if he is not saying clearly what he wants. Why should people point fingers at the narrator? Why should Gangu want to leave the job? What is this happening? The narrator completely does not understand.
Students should get some idea after viewing these 2 or 3 slides that this story runs in the form of conversation.
Yes.
It is more like a conversation, and it is students who have to understand something from conversation probably. This is what I can understand from this conversation.
Yes.
If I were a student.
Yes, this is a story that is dependent on the conversation between Gangu and the narrator. Basically, there aren't other characters whom we see in this story. We do not see other characters as characters. We do not meet the child. We do not meet Gomti, the wife of Gangu. We do not meet them. What we see is only what Gangu talks about Gomti and what the narrator tells Gangu in.
Madam, it is said that any story, any short story must have a plot.
Yes.
Is there any plot or something like that in this story?
Yes. The plot revolves around this particular marriage. Normally, as you know, a short story has a very small plot. It doesn't have a large elaborated plot like you have in a novel. It has a very short focused plot, you can say. And the plot in the story revolves around Gangu wishing or getting married to Gomti. Gomti was this woman who he wanted to marry. So he comes to his boss and he says that this woman who had just been turned out of the widow's home, Gomti Devi, I want to marry her. And because he wishes to marry her, he wants to leave the job.
Who was Gomti Devi, by the way, madam?
Gomti Devi was a widow. A very interesting character sketch of Gomti Devi. She was a widow. Her first husband had died. That is why she was a widow. And there was a home for widows in that village. And the widows' home authorities would look after widows and they would also help them to get married again. So Gomti Devi lived in this house for widows and she was helped to get married twice by the authorities of this home. But both times she left the marriage and came back. A very interesting, as I said, a very interesting character, this Gomti Devi. She broke 2 marriages and came back, and 1 marriage she was widowed from. And now she couldn't stay again anymore in the widow's home because the authorities did not allow it. So she was staying alone in her house in a small room in the mohalla. And there were, if it's a beautiful young widow, obviously there were many young men who were interested in her.
So that means Gomti got married 3 times.
3 times. The first time she became a widow and the 2 times after that she was married. she broke the marriage, ended the marriage, and
What could be
herself-
the possible reasons for that, according to you, at this juncture?
At this juncture, the story says that people have a lot of rumors that are spread in the village about Gomti Devi. A lot of village people are talking about how Gomti Devi must have been a bad woman because she was the one who broke the marriage, or she was the one who came back. People are talking about how Gomti Devi has some kind of a witch or a supernatural influence on her. People are talking about how she was a bad person and therefore she comes back. But according to Gangu, these are all false rumors.
Okay.
People speak a lot of negative things about her, but according to Gangu, all of these rumors are untrue. So, there is a very interesting thing that Gangu says while talking about Gomti Devi. Gangu says, with almost the zeal of a poet, he's like enthusiastically saying this. And when he's talking to his master, the boss, he says, where there is no love, you cannot expect a woman to stay on. You cannot win a woman with mere board and lodging. This is a very profound statement made by Gangu. A very, very pertinent, a statement that can apply even today, 200 years after this book, almost 200 years after this story was written. You can apply the statement even today that a woman cannot be kept in the house simply because she is provided with food and clothing and shelter. A woman needs love. If you want to keep her in your house, you need to love a woman. You cannot have a woman in the house without love.
Can we say that the beauty of Gomti Devi, or maybe attraction toward Gomti Devi, made Gangu to make these kind of statements?
Exactly. Gangu was so much in love with this woman that he could say something like this. It is this feeling he had for her that created these emotions in which he could speak something like this. He goes on to explain to the narrator, to his master, that those people who married her thought they were doing a great favor by marrying a widow and took it for granted that she would do everything for their sake. But to win someone over, one has first to forget about oneself.
It's a very philosophical line.
Very philosophical, and I think students, you should sit for 2 minutes and think about this line. Look at it. To win someone over, one has first to forget about oneself.
Madam, would you elaborate this line further?
I think it's talking about ego and how you have to ignore your ego when you really love somebody. You know, I'm sure you have also heard, and students also know about a lot of clashes that take place in marriages, where people have a very strong sense of ego, that I am better than my spouse, I am better than my husband, or I am better than my wife. Now, this kind of ego is not really what helps to love someone. And that's what Gangu, who is an illiterate man, is teaching us over here. That to win someone, one first has to forget about oneself. You cannot keep thinking about yourself in love. You have to think about the other person. It's like when you're walking on the road and suppose it suddenly starts raining and there is only one umbrella and the person you love is standing next to you. You don't say that I am going to use my umbrella, whatever has to become of you, I don't care. You will say, no, you take the umbrella, I will not take it. I don't mind what happens to me, but you should be safe. And it is this kind of feeling that you see, or we see in this story.
So Gangu was illiterate, but he was courageous and a social reformer by getting married a widow.
Yes, he was a social reformer, and this is where you can see that Premchand's life itself is reflected in Gangu's life. Premchand himself had married a widow. Premchand had 2 marriages himself. He was married to a woman first, but as a child, he was married at the age of 15. And that marriage did not work out. There were a lot of conflicts in that marriage, a lot of fights in that marriage. And after that marriage broke up, Premchand went himself and married a young widow. And this is what we see even in Gangu's life. Gangu himself is marrying a widow, just like Premchand himself did.
So what was going on in the mind of Premchand at that time was reflected in the character of Gangu.
Yes, that is true. So moving on with the story, the narrator says, "Finally, so you have decided?" "Yes, sir," replies Gangu. "All right," says the narrator, "I accept your resignation." So Gangu is allowed to leave the job. And after this, the narrator had always wished that there would be a time when Gangu would come back and admit that he had made a mistake. Because the narrator was so sure that this marriage was a mistake. The narrator was absolutely certain that Gomti was not a good woman. Just like the people in the society were sure, the narrator too was sure that Gomti was not a good woman. And the narrator wanted to prove his point by wishing and hoping and believing that one day Gangu would come back
and would urge for the job again.
Would ask for the job again. But 5 months passed. Gangu had married Gomti and he was working as a hawker, as a rekdi lari khechwa vado manas. And while he was working as a hawker, the narrator would pass on the road. He would find out that he's working as a hawker and he would always stop to inquire about him. But the one common thing for all those 5 months was that Gangu was always happy, always glowing and always carefree. He could make out on the face of Gangu that there was happiness that Gangu felt after he got married to Gomti.
That is why his face was glowing.
His face was glowing. Generally, when we are happy,
and it is a clear-cut indication why he was carefree, because he was a social reformer. After getting married, he must show that kind of courage.
Yes.
And that was reflected on his face.
Yes, that he needed to show people that doing something like this, getting married to a widow, is a good thing. It brings happiness, it brings joy. And this courage is what Gangu has represented. One day, suddenly, the news came that Gomti had run away. Gangu was heartbroken. The narrator at this point feels happy that Gomti has run away, because now the narrator will be able to say, "See, I told you that she will go away. Why did you go and marry her?" And Gangu is completely shattered. He is completely broken. He doesn't know what to do. He's crying all the time and he doesn't know where to go and find this woman who had come into his life and whom he loved so deeply.
Gangu was shattered and narrator was happy because his assumptions went right.
Yes, his assumptions came true. He thought that this is how it was going to happen and it happened so. But why has Gomti gone away? What is it that has happened? She had gone away without telling Gangu. Gangu says, "I am sure I wasn't good enough for her. She was educated and I am an absolute illiterate. If I had stayed with her a little longer, she would have made a man out of me." This, I think, my dear students, is a quote that you must remember. "I am illiterate," says Gangu, "and she was educated." To have this kind of a system, to have this kind of a possibility at a time 200 years ago when even Indian men were not as educated, must have been something so drastic, so radical. She was educated and Gangu was illiterate. Can you imagine a situation where the woman is educated the wife is educated and the husband illiterate. It's a very deep idea that Premchand is presenting before us here, that the woman is who makes the man better. It's a very feminist idea if you look at it in that way, because no man would normally admit to such a thing. It's not very easy to say that it is my wife who makes me a better person. And here we have an illiterate, typically Indian man who comes out and admits to his master that if she had stayed longer, I would have become a better man. I would have become a better person.
So there is a wonderful idiomatic expression here, man out of me. What do you mean by man out of me? What must be going on at that time in the mind of Gangu when he made this statement?
Yes, it's a very interesting statement, because normally we use the word man as a common noun. Man means Purush. Anybody who is a male is called a man. But when Gangu says that she would have made a man out of me, Gangu is talking about not simply being a masculine gender, but becoming a better human being, becoming a more courageous, more brave, more profound human being. And that is why he uses this term, to make a man out of me. When you talk about making a man out of someone, you are talking about making that person into the best that he or she can be. So Gangu goes to search for Gomti. He finds out through some friends and Gomti's some of the Gomti's friends. He finds out that she has gone to a women's hospital in Lucknow. He immediately goes to Lucknow and brings her back home. She has gone to a hospital. What has she gone to do in a hospital, you would wonder? Gomti has gone to the hospital because she has to deliver a baby. Remember that at this point, Gangu and Gomti have been married only for 7 months. 6 or 7 months. And now she is going to have a baby. So it is common sense for anybody who is looking at them or who is talking to them that this baby must not be Gangu's baby.
So people would doubt about her chastity then.
People would doubt about her chastity, and maybe they would even point fingers at Gangu.
Okay.
Because she has left him and gone away. And they would say that Gangu is a fool to have married a woman like this. Why should you marry a woman who has someone else's baby? You don't even know which of the husbands is has had the baby with her. Whose baby is it? Husband number 1, husband number 2, or husband number 3? And Gangu, he is husband number 4. Why should he look after a child whose parentage, whose fatherhood is unknown? You know, at that time, there weren't even DNA tests like we have today. It was absolutely forbidden to be a child like this. Society would look down upon the child as well as the father, because they believe that real mardangi, real manhood is in owning and possessing your wife and your children. They do not realize, as Gangu has realized, that real manhood is in loving the woman, in being able to love her.
Very interesting. Then what happened next?
When the narrator meets Gangu again, he is glowing and he is carrying a baby in his arms. So he looks very happy. He is completely happy that he has a baby. He has now delivered, Gomti has delivered a child, and he is extremely happy. So the narrator says tauntingly, "Oh, so you have got a boy also. That is perhaps why she ran away. Are you sure this is your child?" "Why mine, Babuji?" Gangu replies. "It is God's. It was only a month old yesterday." How long have you been married? This is the 7th month.
So this is the crux of the story
The
now.
climax
Climax.
point. And at this point now you realize or you come to know a lot of things. Gangu has married Gomti 7 months ago. The child was born 6 months ago. The child was born 1 month ago, and therefore the child is only 1 month old today. The marriage is barely 7 months old. That means, obviously, this child is not Gangu's child. Gomti has the baby, was pregnant with the child that belonged to another man, not Gangu, who is now her husband. It was for this reason that Gomti ran away from Gangu and went to the Lucknow hospital. It was for this reason that Gomti decided to leave Gangu. The child was not Gangu's, and she did not want Gangu to be uncomfortable in society. She did not want people to point fingers at him. That is why she left him and went away.
Then what happened?
So the narrator and Gangu again go on to have their conversation. So this child was born within 6 months of your marriage. Yes, said Gangu, undisturbed. And you still consider it your child? Yes, sir. Now, Gangu considers the baby his own child. He does not look at it as another man's child. He does not look at it as a pariah, as a pariah. He looks at it as his own. And it is this quality in Gangu that you would imagine made Gomti also fall in love with him. It is not a one-sided love. It is not a love in which only Gangu loves Gomti. It is a love in which Gomti too would fall in love with a man like this. Who wouldn't fall in love with a man who understands that a woman must be loved, who understands that the priority in a marriage is the man and the wife, the husband and the wife, and who understands that even if the child was from a previous marriage, it does not matter.
So we can make this kind of statement here in relation to the earlier slide, that Gomti made man out of him now.
Exactly. Gomti has now made a man out of Gangu, because through Gomti and through the child, Gangu has been able to accept or to grow up, to be broad-minded enough in order to welcome another man's child into his own life and become a father to the other man. As you can see on the slide, Gangu says he is never bothered that the child would not be his. He says that he had told Gomti to leave him if she did not love him, but she should not let the child separate them. She should not let the child separate them. This is the important point of connection between Gangu and Gomti.
So child should not be a barrier in their relationship.
So it is
utmost love
Yes.
towards Gomti must have encouraged Gangu to make this kind of statements.
Yes. The love that he had for her, the feelings that he had for her is what made him say something like this, that whatever happens, if you do not love me, sure, you can leave me and go away. But if it is because of the child, you should not leave me because of the child. I accept the child. I accept you as well as the child as my own. You are my family. And it is this that the story is trying to bring out. This kind of an acceptance, this kind of a love that this writer was trying to bring out.
That means when you are in love with someone, accept the person in totality with her limitations, and it is reflected
everything,
here.
Yes, with everything. And it is this kind of love only that will bring this glow and carefree nature in your personality. Otherwise, you will never be happy. You will never see happiness in a person in love. When do you see a person in love happy? When there is complete acceptance, acceptance in totality. And the last sentence that Gangu says is the sentence that if I was a student, I would quote in all my answers. After all, when one takes a harvested field, one does not refuse the crop merely because someone else has grown it.
Madam, it is a very, very complicated sentence quotation for students of, at least difficult to digest for students of first year.
Yes.
You will
It
have
is
to
a
throw some
slightly
light on it.
It is a slightly complicated sentence, but it is a very, very profound sentence. It has a lot of deep meaning in it. Look at the depth of the sentence. You know, when you buy a khetar, when you buy a field from somebody, suppose you have bought a field from somebody and there is a crop of wheat which is already growing in that field. You do not take out that wheat and give it to your previous owner, do you? You take the field and you take the crop because it is part of the field. It is not separated from the field. When you harvest the crop, when you cut the crops, you do not take that wheat and say, this is not my wheat, it is somebody else's wheat, let me go and give it back. No, you accept that whole field and the wheat in it as your own because you have purchased that particular field. Similarly, Gangu says that just because the crop was grown by someone else does not mean that you refuse the crop. Just because the baby belonged to someone else, just because somebody else has been the father of that child, it does not mean that you do not accept that child.
So that means story ends with a revolutionary statement.
Very revolutionary statement, and coming from Premchand at a time in the 1800s and early 1900s, this was a time when people were barely able to accept that women were citizens. It was a time when women were not even completely accepted within society, and at a time like this, to say that even another man's child can become my own child is absolutely radical, absolutely revolutionary. And it is because of this and things like this, ideas like this, that we remember Premchand even today.
How much the title, The Child, is appropriate?
The title of the child is appropriate because the entire crux of the story or the climax of the story is based on that title. It is the child that makes the story a climax. If Gomti had not gotten pregnant with another man's child, there would not be a climax, there would not be a complication in the story at all. Gangu and Gomti would have lived happily ever after, and that would be the end of the story. But it is the child that brings about a turning point. It is the child that brings about this profound statement from Gangu, and that is why the child is an appropriate title. The child is an absent character. There is no statement, there is no sentence spoken by the child. There is no statement spoken by Gomti also. The only two people speaking in this story, as Sir has pointed out earlier, are Gangu and narrator. So it is a conversation that we are dealing with. It is a dialogue between two people from which we get an entire story. And it is this that Munshi Premchand has innovated with the form of writing, innovated with the technique of writing stories. Thus, we come to the conclusion of this lecture. We have been very happy, Dr. Chetan Mewada and myself, we have been very happy to be here with you students, and we hope that this lecture will open your eyes towards Munshi Premchand, towards the story of the child, and towards Hindustani literature in general. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandhan, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે संधान